Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AI and Data Show. It's the July episode, and it's great to have you all. Thank you for joining. My name is Matthew Holman. I'm a partner here at the law firm Cripps. It is roasting here in central London, but the aircon is on in the studio, and it's feeling pretty cold. I hope wherever you are that you're not too hot. We've got a great show for you today. It's the last one of our season, and our main event is me interviewing Richard Susskind about his new book, the How to Think About AI, A Guide for the Perplexed. That will be coming up very shortly, and it's a great interview. I hope that you'll stick around for that. Before we get to that, though, we're going to talk a little bit about the DUA Act, which has just passed. And before we talk about that, we're going to deal with the very thorny topic of AI onboarding for trials. With that in mind, I would like to welcome back to the studio, Elliot Fry.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to the studio. It's great to have you. All things AI onboarding, that's what we feel like we've been talking about for a long time now. For those of you who aren't aware, basically, this is about the scenario where we're dealing with AI procurement and AI onboarding. It's the kind of thing we've been doing for many months now, but there's a very novel problem arising, which is clients, whether they're in-house, private practice, or wherever, come along to us and saying, look, we want to onboard something for trial, not for full procurement. We're not buying a whole license for many years. We just want to trial it. And because we're trialing it probably for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, or even 3 months, something like that, we don't want to do a whole procurement exercise because it's really hard to do, takes ages. Is there a shortened version of that we can do to just get this thing onboarded for trial? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that's absolutely possible. It's just a question of ensuring that you've identified those higher risk trials which need escalation, which need a more detailed process. And then you can, for the remainder, which are lower risk, you can go through a much more expedited process to ensure that you're not having to hold up the adoption of innovation.
So if I said to you, Elliot, what's the one thing that an in-house lawyer trying to onboard for trial an AI system, what's the one thing they should be thinking about? What would you pick?
It's got to be input data, ensuring that it's kept confidential, it's not used for future training of those models and systems. That's potentially your crown jewels, which you're inputting into an AI system. You need to make sure it's protected.
What about the hot potato of personal data? I mean, surely we have to do a DPIA for every AI system we're onboarding, right?
Well, the approach we've taken, and a risk-based one, is that there'll be circumstances in which you don't. So obviously, if you're using special category data, you might be treating that, that's inherently carries a higher risk. That might merit escalation, but at the same time, we're keen to ensure within the tool that clients have the opportunity to identify why they don't need a DPIA for what you consider to be lower risk uses of personal data within a trial.
And what about the EU AI Act? I mean, many of the viewers will know all about that. We've been following its progress and adoption here for a long time. Should we be thinking about that when we're thinking about onboarding for trials?
Yeah, absolutely. Even if it's not directly applicable, it's still going to be relevant in considering what's a higher risk use case or system which needs escalation to a more detailed process. So the actual categories there, certainly for prohibited AI and also for high risk AI, are really relevant in trying to figure out what's going to be, whether you need to escalate or not.
Now, I should say that all of this comes with an obvious big dollop of risk, and that is because this is not private practice perfection. It is aimed at pragmatic solutions to try and get AI tools onboarded so that they can be experimented with and then either go to full adoption with a full risk profile, full risk analysis if needed, or ditched if they're not adopted. Elliot has mentioned a couple of times that Cripps has developed an AI toolkit for procurement, including for AI trials. Elliot, where could the beloved viewer learn more about this stuff if they want to?
You can email aitoolkit@cripps.co.uk.
The AI toolkit is a fantastic solution, and we'd love to talk to you more about it. I think there may even be a banner giving you the details now. Elliot, thank you very much for coming into the show. If you, the beloved viewer, have more questions about shortcuts for AI onboarding, then please let us know. We'd love to pick them up at a later date. That leads us to the next section of the show, which is all about the DUA bill, and this is just giving you a little bit of background to what happened. For those of you who watched the December 24 show, you'll know we did a much more detailed feature about the history, almost the chronicles of this bill and its political birth and twice over death and then eventual resurrection as the Dewar Bill, which was passed on the 19th of June, now the Dewar Act. Here are the things that it covers. These are just the headlines. Scientific research, purpose limitation, the alignment of SAR rules to case law, relaxation of cookie rules, the creation of recognised legitimate interests, automated decision making, soft opt-in for charities, and international data transfer relaxation in some context. And conscious that they are, we are giving you the absolute headlines, there's a lot more detail to some of this stuff. To help talk through just a few of the headlines, I would like to welcome into the studio Aiden Dunning.
Hi, Matt.
It is great to have you on the AI and Data Show.
It's great to be here.
It feels like it's been a long time coming.
Oh, I've watched with a lot of appreciation of the things you've done.
As a former in-house lawyer, now private practice partner, what are the things that we just looked at on our headline slide from the Dewar Act? What are the things that really grab you and make you think, yes, that's really important?
Yeah, well, I think I'm looking for opportunities and some efficiencies in that scenario. Looking at the recognised legitimate interests, changes to the automated decision making and scientific research. I think there's things in there, particularly around the reduction of the requirements on the assessments that would be useful for in-house teams to look at. Mm. What about you, Matt? What do you see?
Great question. It's almost like we prepared this. The things that instantly grab my attention and I think are most valuable for all businesses that are involved with, have any kind of online presence, are or the changes to cookie rules. And I think that because we've been waiting for them for so long, like it's been ages waiting for this stuff. The changes are actually quite simple. They've existed, at least in a conceptual way, for about 3 or 4 years, but many of these things go all the way back to 2011 when the original guidance about cookies was drafted. So finally, we have clarification that you don't need consent for setting analytic cookies. You don't need consent for functional cookies. You don't need consent for performance cookies. You do still need consent for tracking cookies. And those changes, I think, will make a very big difference.
Mm. Neither of us concerned about new PECA fines?
PECA, yeah. Well, what do you think?
Well, I think they're big.
They're big, yeah.
Significant changes, moving from $500,000 to 17.5 million. It's quite a jump. It would certainly help put it on the agenda with boards if it were an issue for me, but I'd hope not. And this alignment with UK GDPR is somewhat expected.
If your organisation wasn't fully PECA compliant and you were still the in-house man, in-house lawyer, what would you be saying to your board?
I'd be knocking on the door. I'd be making sure it's a priority of any conversation I'm having with the board.
We don't have loads of time because we want to get to the interview with Richard Susskind, but we can't put down this topic without pausing to talk about the single biggest issue from its political process, which was copyright and LLM training. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's more so what's not in the Act.
Indeed.
And what was removed as an amendment to allow it to be passed ultimately. It's Baroness Kidron, she said it's got to be dealt with in this bill and in this Act. It's something that can't wait, it's that important.
And yet it didn't survive. So for those of you who aren't familiar, there was nothing in the Act on this at all. There was the parallel government consultation that we talked about a lot in the February episode of this. Many of you will know about all about the government's consultation to change copyright law to enable AI companies to train LLM data sets on copyright material. The House of Lords introduced very political content around prohibiting that. The Commons took it out several times. It went back and forth, and it's now not there. One of the things that Kidron said in the House of Lords is if it's not in there now, then it will be too late. And there's a likelihood that whatever comes in the form of legislation on this, it's not coming in the next 6 months. It's going to be a while before we see anything. There's not currently anything tabled as far as we're aware. Do you think Kidron was right? Should we be doing it now rather than waiting 6 months, 12 months, even longer for this?
Yeah, I mean, arguably it's already too late. Lots of the learning has taken place on copyright materials, such that Elton John describes it as thievery on the highest scale. So yeah, I think it needs to happen. It needs to happen soon.
A point well made, and undoubtedly a topic we'll be talking about in more shows. This feels like a good place to segue into the interview with Richard Susskind, part of which does feature a discussion about AI and the creative industries and regulations. So without further ado, we will cut to that interview. We'll see you in half an hour. I'm here with Richard Susskind, author of How to Think About AI. Richard, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So we start every interview in the same way, which is we insist on asking our guests some icebreaker questions. Is it okay if I ask you some icebreaker questions?
I did think they were coming at the end on out of one. No, but please do.
Do you prefer Star Trek or Star Wars, or neither?
Star Trek.
Excellent.
Quite clearly.
Do you sing in the shower? And if so, what do you sing?
Oh, yes. Well, no, I sing all the time, actually, not just in the shower. It's apparently an annoying habit. Anything that's on my mind, the earwig of the day, often James Taylor.
Excellent. If you weren't a specialist tech AI lawyer, what would your ideal job be?
Probably a novelist.
A novelist?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the best holiday destination you've been to?
That's difficult. A toss-up between Mauritius on the one hand and very different, the Scottish island of Harris on the other.
Wow, two very strong choices there. If you were a superhero, what would your ideal superpower be?
I've always quite liked to fly. That would be good.
Indeed.
Let's say not in a plane.
If you were making lunch for yourself at home, what would you make?
A sandwich of some sort.
Well, thank you for indulging me with the irritating icebreaker questions.
I'm not sure that helps. Must be the substance of AI, but...
Well, it definitely helps the audience get to know you a bit better. Let's get into the meat of our debate.
Sure.
First topic is about the ever-evolving nature of AI. You say in chapter 2 of the book, many newcomers to the field of AI seem to believe that recent inventions, ChatGPT and the rest, are the end game, whereas they actually are faltering first steps. You say, as a generality, today's systems are the worst they're ever going to be, which is both a wonderful and terrifying idea.
It's slightly glib, actually, because there are some systems that will fail and won't do any more. But there's a general point there that they're all moving ahead at a remarkable rate.
You also spend a lot of time, particularly in the second half of the book, talking about what if AGI thinking. This idea just continues to drop into the chapters. Why is it, do you think, that people today are suffering from tech myopia? And are you asking too much of people to do what if AGI thinking? Do you think that's something the general populace can actually do?
A couple of explanations necessary there. I think AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence, which is the idea that systems can perform almost all the cognitive tasks that human beings can undertake. So in the broadest of terms, they're as clever as us. This people find deeply unlikely and deeply unsettling. But if you look at the trajectories, if you look at the origins of AI in the early 1950s, when you can trace the original concept, breakthroughs happened in the next few decades every 5 to 10 years. They're now happening every 6 to 12 months. We also have to get into our heads the idea of the not yet invented systems. It would be entirely improbable to think there'll be no further breakthroughs. And so what I try in the book is to alert people to the idea, given the scale of investment in AI, given the brightness of the people involved, given the evident market demand, given crucially the use of AI in the development of the next generation of AI, I think we're going to see and continue to see an explosive growth in the capabilities of these systems.
Do you think, as an aside, that all of these reports, and I agree, they're coming out all the time, do you think they're coming out partly to satisfy an insatiable need within us to feel better about an uncertain future?
They certainly resonate. And I think the authors know that people take great comfort from clear expressions and evidence of the limitations of these systems.
Your life's work has been writing books that have a number of very clear themes, almost orthodoxy, where you're particularly challenging the concept of work, the way work is done, especially in the professions. The book Future Professions talks very strongly to that, as does Tomorrow's Lawyers. This book also talks to that theme, but it's clearly a part of a piece of many parts, as it were. It's not exclusively the theme. Focusing on that issue, though, because it's the one that a lot of people want to talk about. It seems to be getting a lot of traction on the media, on LinkedIn, and everywhere else. Do you think that it's very forgivable that professionals still seem to think that their jobs are perfectly safe? Do you think there's going to be a recalibration between the challenge to white-collar jobs and the perceived safety of blue-collar jobs? I mean, that's a very clumsy way of expressing the idea, but hopefully you capture it. And is your job under threat?
Yeah. My job's certainly under threat. And I say it in the book. I give an example of my use, quite early use of ChatGPT, and slightly later use as well, asking it to draft a column for me for the Times or out for the Times, and saying, by the time we get to GPT-6, I won't be needed anymore. And I don't just say that for a laugh. I say that to bare my soul and to encourage people to think that if we have technologies that can deliver the outcomes that our clients, our people, our organizations want in ways that are cheaper, quicker, more convenient, and higher quality, the market is not going to show any loyalty to our traditional ways of working. Now, in the book, I talk a lot about not us thinking, that I find that every time you speak to a professional, they will identify all sorts of reasons why their work will not be subject to or affected deeply by AI, but that all other professions clearly are up for grabs. And this, it seems to me, to be an unrealistic point of view. I think for very good reason. So often as professionals, we've spent so many years of our lives working in a particular way. We usually, I believe, think that the way we work is important, often morally significant, and that there cannot be better ways of doing what we do. It's been perfected, and we're committed to it. But I think this is to some extent a romantic view of our work. And the challenge I put down is to ask, when is it that how you work, for example, is intrinsically important? That's to say, it's important in and of itself how you work. Or is it just instrumentally important? That's to say, it's important because of the outcomes you deliver. So I say of doctors, for example, that people don't really want doctors, they want health. And if we can find other ways of delivering health that don't involve doctors, don't expect loyalty to doctors. And similarly, I would challenge lawyers and say to you that there may be other ways of delivering the commercial or business or personal outcomes that people seek when they are after some kind of legal advice. Now, in none of this do I take any pleasure in suggesting that as machines become increasingly capable, there'll be less for humans to do, but that's what follows. Now, in the latest book on AI more generally, I touch quite a lot on the future of work. But I raise the issue, I think, in starker terms, because going back to your earlier challenge about what if AGI, what would it be like in terms of our labor force if we had systems that could do all the work we as humans could do? I think the implications are profound, but it's very hard to find a business leader or a government leader who's prepared to discuss this. So the reason I say we must be asking what if AGI is because we face in the 30s potentially the gravest and most significant challenge to our conception of the human labor force and our perception of market and economics than perhaps we've ever faced. So I think it's worth discussing.
Profound because work may be a thing of the past. The concept of work may be a thing of the past. Profound because taxation and economies based on work may no longer be sustainable. Is it those things? Is it more than those things?
I think that the way we think about our lives is very much rooted in humans working for a living. Many people will say, in fact, that work gives their life meaning too. And our conceptions of productivity within the market are very much rooted in a labor force undertaking work. But if we no longer have a labor force, if great productivity is achieved through these remarkable systems, then this challenges many of our assumptions, and one begins to wonder, how will you earn a living? Another question that arises, therefore, is how might we share the remarkable wealth that these systems create amongst those who are disempowered, disenfranchised, as they might see it, because they no longer have employment or paid employment.
I have to ask you, forgive me for this tangent, but you've been challenged by many for being pessimistic, a point you made earlier. With the advent of ChatGPT and its the sort of tidal wave of systems into particularly the legal profession, but others as well, did you at least feel a bit like, I told you so, guys?
There's a little bit of that. I wouldn't admit it if I was absolutely delighted, but I'm not really, because I mean, you say I've been challenged, and it is true, but I've also been supported over the years by numerous academics, by numerous practitioners, by government people and judges and the rest of it. So I've not felt beleaguered. And in fact, if I'm honest, I quite enjoyed the challenge. I think this has been a good thing to devote my life to asking people to think differently about how they live, how they work, how they help others, and how technology might affect that. So a little bit of happiness about it, but not too much.
Well, I think you'd be very entitled to if you wanted to. Let's move on to a different topic, and it's one that is certainly vexing legal professionals, particularly legal professionals in my field and other externals and in-house lawyers who are watching, and that is the issue of AI and creativity, particularly in the regulated and IP sector. In Chapter 5, you summarise this issue quite nicely. You talk about the complexity of the creative industries, and I suppose to some extent it ties into what we were just talking about in work. What is it about the nature of art and creativity that so vexes this issue? And do you have any thoughts about the government's proposals from its consultation last year to create this European-like system for LLM training?
Originally, by which I mean a few years ago, when we were discussing the impact of AI on work and the professions, and people said to us, what kind of work should our children do? We tended to say, why not something creative? Because when we looked at the systems in 2014, 15, it did seem at that stage that what we would call creativity, the generation of innovative, novel content, seemed beyond the capabilities of most machines. And yet we saw with the emergence, for example, of AlphaGo, that game where the system played a remarkable move that most people, if it had been a human being, would have said it was genius, not just innovative or creative. And certainly since generative AI, we all know that these systems can produce text, images, music that is certainly novel. And to some extent, I think this does challenge our perception of ourselves. I think for many people, the defining human capability had been our creativity, and the mechanistic nature, or the perceived mechanistic nature of machines seemed to be over in the edge, while center screen is humans being innovative, imaginative, creative, and so forth. So there's perhaps a challenge to what it is to be human, and one of our central characteristics. Well, what I try to explain in the book is that these systems, they're not creative in the same sense as we are. We use our own intellect and minds and brains in ways that we don't fully understand to create innovative content. But machines do it in entirely different ways. I think it would be folly to suggest because they work differently that what they produce isn't innovative and new. Well, what fascinates me is looking many years ahead. And again, I urge people to engage in what if AGI thinking. My worry about the current debate, and of course the creative industries have been a very clear and loud voice in this debate, is that it is quite short-sighted and it is quite reactive. And we haven't fully thought through the paths that we're likely to follow in the world of creation and innovation. So if you think of what if AGI, if that's your starting point, what if human beings could be outperformed by these machines? This could mean that we have literature that is superior to what we read today. It could mean music that is actually created, personalized for us on the basis of all the other music we like. It'll be immersive, participative, virtual reality-based entertainment. The whole nature of culture and entertainment is likely to change. And so what I worry about is that the debate is about what I call short-term AI. What will the short-term impact be on people in the creative industries of fundamental changes in intellectual property law? And I think, again, that's very producer-provider oriented. And what we're seeing, I think, a lot from the creative industries is, to some extent, the not us thinking. And they might not be saying it can't be done to us, but they're saying it ought not to be done to us. And I would ask, and I think this is why I'm broadly sympathetic to the more liberal approach that the government's recommending, I would ask the creative industries to think less of themselves in the same way as I say to doctors and lawyers, it's not about you, and to think we are perhaps on the threshold of transforming what it is to be entertained. We are on the threshold of perhaps having within the United Kingdom an AI-based entertainment industry that could be world-beating because we've identified quicker than others how to adapt to these emerging technologies. And this is what I want a public discussion about. The rush to regulate makes me feel queasy because, and I know this of parliamentarians, the harsh reality is that very few people in Parliament have any real conception of AGI and what is going to unfold. And secondly, the discussions are so terribly focused on the immediate needs and concerns that arise from AI. We need this broader public conversation. When we had concerns about in vitro fertilization, about genetic engineering, we took the step back and we had serious commissions of inquiry and public discussions. In AI, because people have these very strong instinctive views, somehow these visceral responses seem to morph into policymaking without really informed, impressive, deep, profound, imaginative debate. And so while my instincts and intuitions are to join with the government in being more open-minded and being more liberal and thinking again about copyright and how it governs the systems that require to be trained, I, at the same time, still feel that we're not really having a sophisticated conversation about the 30s.
Can I challenge you on something there?
Please do.
I think a lot of businesses, a lot of governments, a lot of what we know is common in lawmaking in Western societies are by nature reactive. Reactivity is what they do. A problem arises, they react to the problem. A problem arises, they react to the problem. And what you're suggesting with what if AGI thinking is they become proactive. Now they think about a thing that doesn't yet exist. Are we really just asking them to do something which is fundamentally beyond them? It is almost ultra vires in a sense that they cannot possibly get there because they lack the capacity to even understand what it is you're asking of them.
We haven't had the tools in the past, but many in-house lawyers say to me, I do a lot of research with in-house lawyers, that their aim is to become involved earlier in the life cycle of issues within their business. Very often the lawyer is called in when the problem is staring the non-lawyer in the face, or the lawyer is called in to do what is rather disparagingly called the wordsmithing, where you put your head in your hands. If you'd asked me, I wouldn't have structured it or organized like this in the first place. So there's very straightforward issues, I think, about how we might, and this is independent of AI, how we might encourage lawyers to become earlier in the life cycle, involved earlier in the life cycle. But we haven't had the tools to do the kind of risk management I'm talking about. I did a project recently with some in-house lawyers, and we're trying to pin down the essence of in-house lawyering, working at board level as well in this. And I know this to some extent sounds simplistic, but in the end, the pithy way of summarizing what is expected of the lawyers is to keep us out of trouble. That's what many people on boards want. It's the chief executive, keep us out of trouble, whereas some people rather amusingly say keep us out of jail. And by its very nature, and this is something I wrote about back in 96 in my book, The Future of Law, you're absolutely right. The nature of professional service has been reactive, but I'm saying no more, because we can easily envisage, and there are already some early examples of this, that you will be able to insert into the systems of organizations, the financial systems, their databases, their email, their word processing systems, bots and agents that will roam around. And just as when your blood is taken, doctors are looking for early markers of disease, these systems will be looking for early markers of legal difficulties, perhaps exposure to litigation there, danger of defamation over there, possible cartel activity over there, breach of contract there. We will have the ability to monitor and evaluate a business's exposure to legal liability.
I'd love to hear your view about the state of affairs for our regulators and how they can govern what we're currently facing. Do you think they're fit for purpose?
One of the points I make in the book is that we should expect, as we move from a print-based industrial society to an AI-based digital society, that many of our institutions will need to change to accommodate the very different world in which we're inhabiting. And I think this is especially true in the legal world. If you look at the way we legislate, if we look at the way we create regulation, people in your community, tech lawyers, have been saying literally for 50 years that the law lags 5 to 10 years behind technological advance.
At least.
At least. We can't be having this in the AI-based world. Systems that we cannot yet conceive of profound global and local impact may pop up, and we need to be sufficiently agile to be able to regulate or to be able to think through policy and regulate and legislate in very quick time. And so I would challenge the extent to which our legislative processes and our regulation generation processes are indeed fit for purpose. I don't think this is trivial. I think it's true also, incidentally, of our court system. I've heard many senior judges saying one of the great things of the English system is that as these new challenges emerge, in the manner of the common law of the past, we can adapt our law sufficiently flexible in a common law system to accommodate new combinations of events. But as you know better than I do, if you have a dispute of a substantial nature, it will take many years to resolve. And interestingly also, whether or not an important new point of AI law goes through the court system is often rather arbitrary or a matter of luck or not luck. And so another challenge for us is to take a step back and ask what lawmaking should look like in a rapidly advancing AI-based society.
Let's move on to our last topic, and I'm really keen to discuss this with you. In your book, you talk a little bit about AI across the course of the next 5 years. And at the end, in particular the chapter, The Great Schism, which you go far, far into the future, way beyond the next 5 years, the next 50 years, the next 100 years, essentially, to think about what the future of humanity looks like in the context of AI, and if indeed there is a future of humanity in the context of AI. So I'd love to unpack that a bit, but I also want to reflect on something you say right at the start. You say that your own view has changed, and you talk about how AI is this double-edged sword, a really nice and neat idea of I suppose, capturing that there are both many blessings and many detriments that come with this advancement. Let's unpack that a bit.
So the question of the Great Schism, the background here is, I say, imagine, therefore, that our systems are unfathomably capable. Imagine we have not just AGI, artificial general intelligence, but superintelligence, and these systems are phenomenally more capable than us. What does that mean for the future of humanity? And I'm afraid I even go further and say, what does it mean for the future of the cosmos? And what I identify is essentially two different views. There is a view among some cosmologists and physicists which runs something like this. They say the universe has been around, the universe as we know it, has been around for 13.8 billion years. Humans have been around a few 100,000 years. In the cosmic scheme of things, humans are simply a blink in the eye. And it may well turn out, the point is, that the only contribution that humanity makes to the cosmos is to develop these unfathomably more capable systems that in due course will do two things. They will propagate across the universe, bringing intelligent life of a sort across the universe, and will in due course replace us. That's not such a cheery view, but it's the view that many physicists take, that this is the next stage in evolution. And the great schism is between those who believe that our cosmic obligation is to spread some kind of intelligence around the world, and those who say, no, the obligation is to future humans to use the technology to promote our happiness and our health and our well-being. And that is a debate that is theological, it's philosophical, as well as technological. And the way I frame it is we have four options. And I draw from corporate law in this context. I say we might want to have a takeover where we say, let's hand the keys of the kingdom over to these much more intelligent or capable systems. We might have a merger, which some people call transhumanism, where biological organic humans merge with digital machines to create some new kind of entity. We might want to have a joint venture, but we keep at arm's length, so we're not entirely linked to one another. And we might want to some termination where we want to say, let's just stop this now. The whole thing is looking far too scary. And what's very interesting for some people is glaringly obvious. It's like, of course, this must be about keeping control of these systems and promoting humanity. But there is another view that this may be our grand contribution. This may be why, if one has a kind of purposive view of the universe, this may be why humanity exists.
You say in The Great Schism that your view is that you're not interested in going further than a joint venture.
That's right.
Why is that?
In the end, and you'll notice I end the book quite quickly on that note, and I do this intentionally because it's in a way it's just a personal observation. It seemed to me it's an absurd cosmic gamble, and it's a great arrogance to think that we have some kind of cosmic duty. The arrogance is to imagine there are no other intelligent lives out there. The duty is to think that this is the way we can contribute like no other entities out there. It seems to me to gamble humanity on what is quite speculative would be a rather large gamble. But the philosophical argument, it's quite a difficult argument. The philosophical argument is that although we're creating these amazingly capable machines, if they are in the end what David Chalmers calls zombies, that's to say there is no conscience or consciousness, there is no internal perspective, there is no subjectivity, there's no cognitive events, they're not thinking. Do we really think the end game is to fill the universe up with these lumps of metal that are beeping and flashing with no one there actually to perceive them? That seems to me to be a rather strange outcome. And the problem of other minds, as we call it, we cannot ever know whether or not these systems actually are enjoying consciousness in the same way as we are. And again, I say in any event, if consciousness does arise in very complex systems, whether or not that consciousness would be anything like our consciousness is another question. So these are deep, difficult scientific and philosophical issues, which I try to unpack in a rather homely way. And in the end, I say the gamble with humanity would be intolerable. But that then does lead to some interesting questions about what we should do now, because certainly Silicon Valley is moving towards the development of these massively more capable systems. But if we do not have in mind these systems enjoying some kind of autonomy, why is it we would be doing this? Or should we not be discussing the limits we'd like to impose on these systems? And is that a realistic notion at all, given there's so many different countries with different aspirations for AI involved? So I say the genie is half out the bottle. I think we've got about 10 years to think through what we want to do with AI. Can I answer your other question?
Please.
Rather crucial one. And my short story in this is that over the last 44 years, I've been very optimistic about AI. I've seen that as the technology has developed, many of our gravest social and common challenges across the world, our healthcare crisis, our access to justice crisis, our educational crisis, our climate crisis, in various ways I'm entirely confident that future generations of AI will help us overcome these problems. And that is cause to rejoice. But as you'll also have read in the book, I identify a mountain range of risks as well that I hadn't sought to look too carefully at until the late 2022 period, when the systems made a huge leap forward. And when I look at the range of risks, whether they be the existential risks or the societal risks or the economic risks, or the risks of these systems simply giving rise to everyday loss or damage or injury, it does seem to me that the challenge for our era is to balance the benefits and threats of AI. And that's why I say that saving humanity with and from AI is the defining challenge of our age.
Richard, thank you very much for joining me on the AI and Data Show.
Been my pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome back into the studio. That was the interview with Richard Susskind. I hope you found it enjoyable. We don't have time for Q&A, unfortunately, because it was a slightly longer interview, and I wanted to make sure that we got as much of it into the show as possible. Thought-provoking, challenging, enigmatic as always. I would thoroughly encourage you to buy a copy of his book, which is available at all good bookshops. I make it my life's work to read as much as I can on this topic, and I doubt I'll read a better book on this issue this year. It's incredibly detailed in its depth, but it's still refreshingly short. A fantastic read. Please do check it out, How to Think About AI by Richard Susskind. That's the end of our show, and I wanted to firstly acknowledge we haven't got any AI elves because we were running out of time. We decided to give them a rest, but the AI elves are here. They're just hanging out here anyway, so come and hang out here, and you can be here for the final sign-off. So thank you firstly to all of our amazing guests, Ben Malling, Anya Proops KC, Zoe Webster, obviously Richard Susskind, who just did the fantastic interview you saw, and the writer but also Sir Robert Buckland and Jamie Susskind, who featured in the May show. That was the live May event. Thank you to all of you who made it to that. To the Crips team who contributed to all the shows in this season, Elliot, Phil, Catherine and Aiden, thank you both for coming on. Thank you to the elves who are hanging out, and also to the elves who aren't here, Ben and Amy. To the production team, to the many people who make this work, Nicole, Rachel, Charlie, Kirsty, Charlotte, Chris, Josh, Jono and Paul, for all of your hard work. I'm eternally grateful. The AI and Data Show is taking a break for the summer, so if you've enjoyed this and you found it useful, then feel free to check out the historic versions that are on the website. The catalogue is there. This episode will be dropped as a podcast straight afterwards, so anywhere you get your podcasts, I get mine at Spotify, you'll be able to find this there. The AI Toolkit, remember to check that out, and also the Durac training. If you're interested in that, then let us know through the feedback form at the end. Otherwise, that is everything. Thank you very much to all of you for viewing. We will hopefully see you again after the summer. But until then, have an amazing summer break if you're going away, and we'll see you all again very soon. Adios!